This Hang On and Air is live. Sigmund Bloom here. Cecil Lammy's on assignment. Got Dr. Gene Bramall. Got Matt Waldman. We got week 11 underway at halftime. Not quite the high-scoring game that we expected, but thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. First, I suppose, I will check with one Matt Waldman. Give us a game update here as we're at halftime of Carolina-New Orleans.
Sure. I mean, it's been an interesting game in some respects, but a lot of it's because neither team has been able to protect their quarterback extremely well. We knew that was probably going to happen with Carolina Panthers, but the Saints were giving up a fair bit themselves. And so you've seen some sacks, you've seen some bad throws. Drew Brees made a really awful throw where the ball got away from his hand for an interception. You saw Carolina get stopped numerous times inside the red zone on one ridiculous series of plays. And resulted in a field goal, but they did eventually score with Jonathan Stewart on one of those plays, and then, or at least later on in the half, and then they also followed with Ted Ginn on a beautiful deep bomb, which was probably the best play of the game, just after the fact that they had blocked another kick for the Saints, and Luke Kuechly ran it back. And I don't think I've ever seen Luke Kuechly as angry in my life as when he realized that one of his teammates pushed the kicker about 10, who was 10 yards behind him, pushed the kicker and ruined his long touchdown run. But otherwise, I mean, you're looking at Jonathan Stewart with probably maybe about 20 yards and, and a touchdown. Not much from some of the other players. Brandon Cooks has been fairly used fairly regularly. We saw a drop pass from Willie Snead, but he's gotten involved a little bit. Very little involvement with Fleener and Thomas. And then you're also looking at, from the Carolina side, we've seen some work from Greg Olsen, but Devin Funchess has been fairly active. And then we saw Kelvin Benjamin have a nice play, but then take a hit, and he was kind of messed up with his arm for a little bit. So kind of waiting to see what's going on there. I don't know if he's back in or not. You guys can let me know.
Yes. In and out of the game. And what's interesting here is, Carolina's put 20 points on the board, but it's because of turnovers. It's because of Saints turnovers that have really been setting up those plays, and the fail in the special teams. And the Saints have been getting 10, 15-yard gains pretty regularly. I mean, Drew Brees was up to 130 pass yards, but it's just not resulting in any points here. The Carolina almost playing an explicit bend but don't break defense. Just giving up those gains, but really clamping down here. Doc, let's start out with, do you got anything on Kelvin Benjamin? We've been watching this in the first half. I believe he went to get x-rays, and he's been in and out of the game. Doesn't look too comfortable out there.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many replays specifically. It looks like, with the x-rays being negative and him being cleared to come back out on the field, probably more of a shoulder sprain than anything else going on, but it's really hard to tell sometimes exactly what the nature of things are. If there's not collarbone or dislocation or something else going wise, we've seen rotator cuff injuries, we've seen labral stuff, we've seen AC sprains. AC sprains are probably the most common and the most likely thing that's going on here, but they're painful injuries even with the adrenaline going on, especially coming out of halftime. Hopefully he won't be stiffening up and have too much trouble coming back.
Okay, so let's jump into the Dr. Gene injury report this week. And, of course, one of the biggest names leading things here, Gene. If he can't get on a plane on Tuesday, does that mean, yes, there's something up with Rob Gronkowski? And not just for Week 11, but for future weeks. What kind of issue could we see here with Gronkowski? How long could this last?
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody can give you an accurate answer on that yet. I think it seems like most of the expectations are that he'll be back next week. I think that's reasonable. But there's still some healing that has to be done and recovery to be done. There's conflicting reports on exactly what the nature of the injury is, whether or not it's a punctured lung or something along those lines. And I think there's some semantics involved here between what we've heard from Rappaport and what we've heard from Schefter. I think there is a lung injury there. It's not been cleared for contact, hasn't been cleared for travel. If there is a little bit more of a rib situation there, it could cost him next week and maybe a little bit beyond. But I don't think we've heard anything specific to that regard yet. And I don't think there's any reason to not believe that he won't be back yet, but I don't know that they're going to know that until Monday or Tuesday of next week. So definitely out this week, and we'll see how the beginning of next week looks.
Gene, let's talk a little Thomas Rawls. He's supposed to be back in action this weekend. So how risky is this? Would you, if you had Thomas Rawls, would you start him, or would you equate starting him as maybe hot potting at Yellowstone?
I don't think there's much of an injury risk here. They took their time bringing him back. He was fully practicing last Friday and has been fully practicing this week. But I think from a production standpoint, we're getting some conflicting reports from Pete Carroll himself, who says he may play considerably. Chris Mortensen today saying that they're going to ease him back. Again, similar to the Gronk situation, I don't think these are mutually exclusive. Playing him considerably and easing back, you could make an argument both of those things mean 10 to 15 touches in the correct game script scenario. But CJ Prosise played well last week. They clearly wanted to see what they had in him as they expected Rawls back to decide what they wanted to do with Kristen Michael, and we saw how that turned out. So with Prosise playing well, I don't think that, how many touches do you think the running backs are going to get? If you think that they're likely to get 40 to 45 this week somehow, then yeah, Thomas Rawls is probably going to be a pretty good start. But I don't see Prosise getting less than 10 touches, so you almost have to project him for 30 to 35 plus to think that Rawls is going to be, a pre-injury, pre-Prosise workload from last year. So I think that's the concern there. You guys can speak to that a little bit more carefully than I am. But I'm not too concerned injury-wise with him.
I think the game script will be more, just the offense is going to incline them to go more pass-heavy, more CJ, precise. Gene, Santa Claus sighting, running, doing light running, Adrian Peterson. Is there a non-zero chance that he has some fantasy relevance before Week 16, or do we still feel comfortable that that is a big old goose egg?
I think it's unlikely. Keep
Good,
hearing optimism and optimism and more optimism.
Today.
And I think everybody's getting tied into this December business with him, and we're 2 weeks away, and he's just been cleared to run.
Santa Claus, he comes in December. Everybody knows that.
There's 31 days in December. Right now. That's right. So there's 31 days in December. I think everybody took December to mean that he's going to be back right away and he's going to be ready for 20 to 25 touches. And, yes, he's proven he's played through sports hernias before. He's played through very significant ankle sprains before. He's recovered quickly from an ACL injury. But this isn't this is not in the same way that Tyler Eifert really couldn't be rushed. Adrian Peterson cannot be rushed. Otherwise, it's just silliness to have done the surgery in the way that they did it. And he's probably got another month at minimum of rehab to go. So maybe, yes, the end of December, but that would imply that the offensive line is playing well, and the struggles that they've had as an offense overall in the last 2 to 3 to 4 weeks go away, and that Matt Asiata and Jerick McKinnon have very little role for him to be able to get, to project Peterson to 15 to 20 productive touches sometime in December is still a stretch to me.
Gene, I was worried about Larry Fitzgerald when he landed after making a diving catch with maybe his chest or his back with the way that he landed, but then now it's knee ankle, and I just need a little help here because I need something to kind of calm me down here, like this hamster in a blanket eating a carrot. Sometimes you just need that to kind of calm you, because I'm a Larry Fitzgerald owner in multiple leagues. Am I going to get the hamster eating a carrot in a blanket, or am I going to have someone throw this hamster on a wheel and tell him to run?
So are you saying that I'm the hamster in a wheel?
Yeah, I thought you're squirrel.
No, not the man. You're not the man.
It's like the guy within the guy here. You're screenshotting me.
Don't screen share that URL, or people are going to be able to crash our Hangout.
That's right. That's true. What are you asking me about?
How did I screen share that? Yeah.
Oh, I lost it already.
Yeah.
Who are we talking about?
I'm talking about this
Larry
hamster.
Fitzgerald.
There we go. Yeah. There we go.
Oh, the hamster.
There we go.
That is very comforting.
I feel really good about Larry Fitzgerald right now that he's already back to a full practice. We've seen Fitzgerald limited throughout the week. And for him to be fully practicing on Thursday, knowing that it sounds like there's a little bit of leftover concern about the MCL injury that he's been fighting all year long, and then the ankle on top of it and whatever back contusion or anything that he's not even listed on the injury report with, but we know he's dealing with something painful there too, is as reassuring as it gets this time of the week. I always feel like those limited practices are the tester practices. But if you're going to let him fully practice, I think that shows that the medical staff doesn't think, that there's much risk of him aggravating something to the point where he won't be able to play, risking those kind of meaningful Thursday practice reps. So I think he's going to be good to go. There's always room for a Friday surprise, but I'm not expecting to see one.
Well, then you've definitely made my inner fantasy owner feel like a hamster in a blanket eating a carrot.
That's so nice. That's just that's like the squirrel that liked to hang around in Gene's pocket. I don't know what that squirrel liked to eat. Gene,
he ate a banana. I don't know if that's what killed him or not, but
we had a deal.
Exotic foods.
Yeah.
Bananas are tropical. Squirrels are not a tropical animal. Gene.
Yeah, well, if it was his last meal, he enjoyed it.
All right. Sammy Watkins. Monte asked about Sammy Watkins. He was maybe going to return to practice this week, but not. Let me put it to you this way. Let's say Sammy Watkins returns to practice next week. What kind of clock does that start? What if when he returns to practice? What are we looking at? Are we looking at 2 or 3 weeks, or if he returns to practice next week, we still may not even see him play this year?
Yes, all of the above. I don't think we're looking for anything other than Sammy Watkins to say, I feel good and my foot doesn't hurt anymore. Because he went from sometime in July all the way through, I guess, the end of September, if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't it week 3, with not being able to get through pain in his foot, but being cleared for contact and being cleared to do pretty much whatever he wanted, and still not healthy enough to do so. So, we've taken another 6 to 8 weeks off at this point. He was eligible to return to practice last week and hasn't yet. And I don't think any of those I think the timeline is kind of off the board here at this point because there wasn't anything in particular that he had done. He didn't have a revision surgery. He didn't have anything other than we're just going to go through the rehab process again. And that's kind of a 6 to 8 week situation. I think they just reset the clock and see where he is. But until we see Sammy Watkins prove to himself and the team and to his doctors that he's not going to have pain when he moves, I don't think we can trust him to come back on the field. And I don't know if we're going to know that. Maybe even until after the first week or 2 he comes back. We didn't really hear a whole lot about it until then the first time. But I don't think they're going to clear him to come back if that's the case, if he's still having pain. So I think they're probably hopeful for maybe week 13 or week 14, I would think. But that he needs to be back on the practice field soon so that he can get through the reconditioning process. I think I would set the clock at the day he returns to practice. Maybe he returns the week after in limited fashion, and that's kind of the best you get. So for me, I think at this point, I think week 13 in limited fashion is the earliest possible return, and it could easily be 2, 3, 4 weeks or 2017 after that.
Gene, as a former owner of multiple cats, I can tell you that this definitely fits as results may vary. In that department, Martellus Bennett with the ankle and being with the Patriots, is he a results may vary? Will this be a pleasant experience, or as a fantasy owner, will you have scars at the end of it?
I think he's okay. I think he's still trying to play through a painful injury. He had the bye week. I thought he looked pretty good last week. There was some indication every once in a while that maybe he couldn't get up to top speed as quickly as you'd have liked him to, but he didn't seem as limited as he was before the bye week. So I think he's going to be okay. I wouldn't shy away from him.
Gene, Adam Beasley today, Miami Herald Dolphins reporter, tweets about one Mike Pouncey. Pouncey did not practice, having issues with his hip again, same hip, getting him with the doctors. Now, we all know, in hindsight, it's so clear that when the Miami offensive line gelled around Mike Pouncey, also they've got a problem with Brandon Albert. We're going to see Laramie Tunsil go back to left tackle. Jai looked like he was going to be running back 1 for us down the stretch. How does this affect that picture? And not just for this week against L.A. Hello, Aaron Donald, against the backup center. But looking forward with this issue with Mike Pouncey and his hip, is this something that could be more than a minor blip? Could we go back to the bad old early season days of the Miami offense?
Yeah, it's possible. I don't think we know too much more than what we were told today, and that he kind of took himself off the field. Yeah, he kind of took himself off the field because he didn't feel right? So it could be a quick check-in. I think things are okay. You could still safely play through this pain, and he'll be able to do so. Or they have a little bit more concern, and they want to watch him carefully. We've seen this with Demaryius Thomas. We've seen it with some other players over the years where guys will try to play through these injuries, and depending on who they are, play pretty effectively. It's kind of a brutal week for offensive line injuries, though. It's about 8 or 10 of them that are going to affect
Can you run down a few
offenses this year.
other ones?
Well, I mean, both the long guys are going to be out. You mentioned Brandon Albert. Those guys in particular. I haven't heard yet about whether or not TJ Lang is going to come back for Green Bay yet. There's a couple of guys with concussions, Bobby Massey, and the other one's slipping my mind right now. But I think there's 8 to 10 guys that we need to be paying attention to. Lots of them are going to be longer-term situations. You hope that some of these guys, including Pouncey today, come back sooner than later. Minnesota's the really issue. I don't know who they have left to even put out there right now.
Jeremy,
maybe they have Matt.
Yeah, maybe Jeremy Macklin. Groin.
I don't think he's going to play. Okay. I think we're finding at this point that him playing those 10 to 15 snaps, I think probably ended in aggravation rather than just tightness and not feeling ready. Didn't practice at all last week, hasn't practiced at all this week yet. And once you get to this point, you have to wonder whether or not it's a 3 to 4 week injury at minimum, kind of in that mid-grade range. And I always like to see, we talk about this a lot. I like to see guys come back, at least practice a little bit and get reconditioned before they practice the following week and expect to play. So I think, barring something totally unexpected tomorrow in Kansas City in practice, I think you have to consider Macklin questionable for week 12 too.
Jamal Charles had a trim now on his other knee. He's had surgery on both of his knees. How should we be looking to, it's Dynasty League. If you're out of it, maybe you're trying to get an asset that could help you next year, maybe Jamal Charles or something like that, from a team that you're giving up a win now player. I mean, should we expect there to be some lasting value for Jamal Charles in Dynasty Leagues, or does this news of 2 knee surgeries sure look like the path of a player whose body's breaking down on him?
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. Not to say that he couldn't recover. Probably not for this year. It's hard to say. It's honestly, I think it's probably a good thing that he had the surgery now. I think that suggests that his rehab went well enough from the first surgery that he's able to have another surgery that he needs to rehab so quickly after the first. Or it may be a sign that during rehab from this first injury, he had a setback with the other knee. But I think, we've seen, unfortunately, just going to have to wonder whether or not he didn't recover as well from this ACL injury as he did the last time. Now he's recovering from 2 different, albeit minor, but we know that those trim procedures are, a more concerning thing for the longer term health of the knee and the length of the career. Jamal Charles doesn't have a long career to go with anyway, so you're probably trying to preserve whatever games he has left. And I think you can hopefully count them on more than one hand that he recovers next year and is productive. But I don't see him returning this year, and he's going to have to really look good next year for a team to take a chance on him as more than just a change of pace player, I think.
Gene, Lamar Miller, he's got the shoulder injury, and is this kind of like having the bear looming over you at this point, or is this going to be a friendly situation?
I think it's somewhere in between. I think it's a lingering deal for him, and it's proven to be that. Just limited today. He's playing on Monday Night Football, so we're probably not going to have a good sense of where he is yet. I think everybody is expecting him to play in and around the team from what I can see, but it's pretty clear that it's been limiting him. It was limiting last week's game. He had a little bit of an ankle tweak too, but he was off and on the field with mostly the shoulder rather than the ankle, and we're going on multiple weeks now already. So I don't know that we're closer and closer to a Carlos Hyde situation here where he ends up missing multiple weeks as they allow that to cool off. But I think he hasn't taken what we would consider a full complement of snaps for almost a month now. He's given way to Alfred Blue in a lot of situations, injury or otherwise. So I think they'd like to save him as much as possible. I think you're probably looking at 10 to 15 touches for him until he proves that he's over this rather than something more than that.
Last round here with Dr. Gene. Randall Cobb, Gene. Now, he's playing and he's ramping up his involvement. It wasn't full involvement in the game last week. I think he was in about 2/3 of the snaps. He still doesn't look like himself. And I come back to when he did miss time with his hamstring, he said something like, it's a long season. There's a lot of games left. And we often at the end of the season find out a player was playing through an injury that was really limiting him. And maybe he even wasn't on the injury report by the time the end of the season comes around. But it all makes sense, right? Is this going to be that kind of story with Randall Cobb, that he's not going to be himself for the rest of the year, but we're going to hope and want him to be himself and play him and absorb these 4 for 33 kind of lines? Or should we trust that practice, it's Green Bay, they're conservative, practice, and he's still limited in practice. So how do we decipher this? Because this week, if we assume Josh Norman is going to be on Jordy Nelson at least some, if not most of the time. We want to go to either Devontae Adams or Randall Cobb, or maybe both, but Cobb's condition is a big variable here.
Yeah, I put hamstring strains in a little bit of different category. We might have heard about shoulders or sports hernias or foot injuries or something like that, or even a hip where guys try to play through it. I just feel like it's difficult for running backs and wide receivers to play through hamstring, quad, calf type muscle strains and struggle with those for multiple weeks without somewhere along the line having an aggravation or a setback that cost them multiple weeks. Cobb came back 2 weeks ago at in the fourth quarter of that game and looked pretty good. Mike McCarthy from the beginning last week said that he was going to be a full go player, and that's mostly what we saw. I think the larger question is, where is Randall Cobb in his career, period, injury-wise or not? Because at different points over the last couple of years, he just hasn't been as productive as he was before. And I know there were shoulder injuries last year, and there's some other things he's been dealing with so far this year. But I think we have to consider the fact that whether it's the offensive line and the timing with Aaron Rodgers or just Cobb himself, between struggling to get separation and maybe some of the drops that we've seen as well, he just may not be the same player that he was 2 or 3 years ago.
Gene Dan Hatman, friend of the show, Scouting Academy founder, says this is how you feed a squirrel. So he's giving video tips right here. Yeah, it is.
I really like this new segment, Matt. I would prefer in the future if you introduce all of your questions for Gene with animal videos, because I would tune in just to see which ones you pick.
It is the best use of Facebook that I can even come and think about coming across with ever again. It is all I'm ever going to use Facebook for. But with that in mind, Gene, Deshaun Jackson, he looked pretty banged up a few weeks ago, and that shoulder obviously is bugging him. I mean, how likely are we going to see him down the stretch?
Yes, that's kind of odd to me. I was really surprised to see them clearing him to come back to a limited practice this week, and then 2 of them consecutively. There seemed like there was more optimism than you would expect, and we kind of saw with Eric Decker earlier in the year. Once there's a rotator cuff injury that it seems like is painful enough that it needs to be rehabbed for multiple weeks, it tends to be, a minimum of a couple of weeks of rehab to allow the inflammation to settle down and then kind of go from there. So it's kind of surprising to see him back in practice. But Jay Gruden today didn't sound nearly as optimistic as what we felt like we heard earlier in the week. It was, well, we're still reevaluating him. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get him there yet. Jackson has been a tough player who's played through shoulder injuries, not rotator cuff things. It's been more AC sprains and stuff in the past. And it's nice to see him limited. He had returned to play a pretty full complement of snaps in the past earlier this year when he was DNP, and limited. So to get through 2 limited practices consecutively makes you think that they're evaluating him with the intent that he's going to be able to play. So tomorrow's practice participation and media interviews are going to be important. I'm a little bit more optimistic about him than I was this time last week, but I would still lean on the side of likely inactive, but if he is active, more probably limited than not.
And there you have it, Dr. Gene with their new Animal Planet. I like that, Amante, the Animal Planet Hangout. I really, really appreciate it, because sometimes I won't say we, I mean, I might take myself too seriously, or fantasy football might take itself too seriously. We need some animal. The hamster video, Matt, I'm going to go back to that one, but it is comforting, almost as comforting as Dr. Gene giving us reassurance about our issues.
I mean, I've got another one that could work for us. I mean, I think this one might seem very reassuring too. I just found this one as you were talking.
Oh,
yeah. See, there you go.
There you go. Horses, or is it a llama?
Donkeys, I think.
Donkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Donkeys.
Pretty sure I'm not letting the donkey lick my cheek.
Yeah.
The donkeys are on bye this week.
I don't know this much, is good. But I know that.
Yeah.
I think we can all use some awe moments here. Thank you, Dr. Gene. Wow. I don't know how to follow that.
I'm not sure how you two are going to get through the rest of the show, but I'll leave it.
It's going to go off the rails. This is the last time. Welcome to the last time that Bloom gets to host. Yes. Well, thank you, Dr. Gene.
Hunter S. Thompson hour about to commence.
Yeah, but this is the opposite, though, because we're not going gonzo. We're just saying, watch some soothing animal videos, So what we're watching here is the Saints. The Panthers drive down the field for a field goal. The Saints looking less and less effective here. Let's go ahead, Matt, and again, I've got to mention to folks the top 10. Make it essential. I want to ask you, you have one of number 5 this week was Stephon Landry, or is it Jarvis Diggs? You don't care, you like it, but there's some talk that Patrick Peterson is going to stick to Stephon Diggs. I think last year against Arizona, Stephon Diggs had 2 receptions on 7 targets. Now I can't go back; I haven't reviewed it to see if Patrick Peterson covered him, followed him, but just your knee-jerk reaction because Diggs has 13 catches in back-to-back games now. And certainly, you would think the opportunity at least is going to be there. Mark Ingram looks good tonight. And then he looks like he just knocked himself out at the end of a run, too.
Yeah.
As I say, I really bloomed him. That is a textbook. that is a textbook.
Bam! He got hit by Thomas Davis earlier too, yeah, and Drew was kind of like, "You okay?"
He laid on the ground. He did. He laid on the ground for a little bit on that one. But I mean, like as the words are coming out of my mouth, folks, you will not see a more textbook blooming of a player than that one. As Mark Ingram at the end of a run that makes me say he looks good tonight.
And of course, as Gene Bramwell said, who coined the "I can't quit you" with Mark Ingram, and quits the show just as Mark Ingram gets hurt.
Yeah, so more Tim Hightower tonight. At least there's 10 days until the next game. I want to get your opinion, though, folks that are on the fence about Stephon Diggs this week because of the Patrick Peterson factor. And that, and that also could affect if you look more to Kyle Rudolph or if you're digging deeper, somebody like Adam Thielen. What do we think about the Diggs-Peterson Titanic matchup here?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that you have to understand is we all know that Patrick Peterson is an excellent cornerback and good cover corner player. But one of the things that he has mentioned earlier this year, and he's talked about, is that the receivers that give him the most difficult time are the small, quick players who can change direction and do multiple things on a route in a short space. Those guys drive him crazy, he said. And he was referring to T.Y. Hilton. Well, Stephon Diggs is very much cut in a similar cloth as T.Y. Hilton. He might not be as good as Hilton in some areas, but he runs routes like that. So I would not be as prone to just dump Diggs by the wayside for this week. In fact, I still think that he'll be the leading pass getter. Maybe there's a little more bust upside for a tight end like Rudolph or one of the other guys, but are you really going to insert them in your starting lineup? To me, with the kind of boom bust nature of what they offer, I just don't see any of those other guys being hot options for you when you're going to be looking at other players who are probably safer wide receiver 3s in that course. Whereas with Diggs, for me, I think his downside, his low end is still going to be probably a 5-catch game for 60 yards. And that's still not bad for you if that's your low end.
Now, moving on in the top 10, I wanted you to give us our latest update on your man versus zone. Trying to forecast. No, it's good though. I mean, look, this is all we should really ask as fantasy analysts to do. They're doing what you're doing in the top 10 every week, which is that intersection of observation-based football knowledge with fantasy implications and trying to then project the next data point. And the Patriots offense, I mean, this is just did the power grid earlier tonight, the DFS. I mean, this is a massive question for DFS, trying to decipher which players we think will do the most. So give us how your findings have been up to this point, and then what your predictions are for week 11, because obviously this is the all-you-can-eat fantasy buffet, and your level of confidence in the predictions.
Yeah, and so far they've been pretty on point because, the basis of it has always been that you don't have to worry about Rob Gronkowski or LeGarrette Blount. They're pretty matchup proof week to week, and that the guys that where are optimal matchups in terms of what they can offer you versus man are Martellus Bennett, Chris Hogan, and LeGarrette Blount, even though I think Blunt's a little bit more matchup proof. And then the optimal zone guys are Edelman, White, and Amendola. So when you look at the situation, Bennett's only been the real wild card thus far that's either really played against that in some ways, and some of that's been because he's been hurt. And then last week, when he was facing more zone options and Gronkowski got hurt later at parts of that game, once he got hurt, they used Bennett more in the Gronkowski role of that offense, and he thrived because they just went to him over and over again on some man-oriented routes, where before, if Gronkowski was in there, he was used more on the side of the field where he was going to draw more of his own type of coverage, because the way that Seattle plays, you have it's essentially his own defense, but if you play men outside, they will cover man to man, and they put Bennett outside, put Deshaun Shed on him, and Bennett just dominated him. Or they used some plays where they would run play action, and in the opposite direction, they'd send Bennett going opposite that play action look, and he'd come wide open. So I would say that the injury has been the biggest issue. But now, they're going to play this week against the 49ers, and they like to play press coverage. That's a team that does have some zone looks, and they like to do some sort of hybrid things and be aggressive with some blitzes when they can, but they are more of a press coverage team. So as long as Bennett's healthy enough to go, I think that that's a guy that you'd want to look at. And then over Edelman or over Amendola, I would look at Chris Hogan as long as he's healthy enough to go. And those are the guys that I'd really look at. And the guys that I would avoid more would be someone like James White, who, while he gives you some touchdown ceilings with some screen passes and maybe 4 to 6 receptions for 30 to 50 yards on a usual basis, which isn't really a lot, but it's helpful to you in a pinch. I don't think he's going to be as helpful to you in a pinch this week. So you would probably want to look elsewhere if you're looking for that kind of desperation play.
Now, I really enjoyed seeing you breaking down in the top 10 this week some new players that we have to evaluate and the emerging fantasy options. Tyreek Hill, again, we've talked about him a little bit before, but you gave him a good treatment this week. And I want to frame it for you this way, because I remember, again, it was that Steelers-Chiefs game that I was going back and watching, and he just popped. He sometimes it's just a basic eye test kind of thing. Now, what I want to know is, did you watch Tyreek Hill for the RSP at all? And
yes.
How does what you're seeing now compare? I mean, because it doesn't seem like anybody. I mean, I know that there was some off the field stuff that affected his draft stock, so maybe that's why he fell more. But I mean, this is a player that it looks more like what they want Tavon Austin to be than Tavon Austin does. And I know Tavon Austin was 8th in a weak draft, but still, Tyreek Hill didn't get the kind of draft billing that a player that has translated the way he has should. So give us in this week against, without Jeremy Maclin, Tyreek Hill, someone we have to consider against Tampa Bay secondary. Of course, it comes down to Alex Smith. Do you trust Alex Smith? But if you do even want to give Alex Smith a chance, Tyreek Hill this week looks like a very interesting play. What have you seen from him up to this point, and does it surprise you based on what you saw before he entered the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing about Tyreek Hill was really his character and the way that he was used. And we're not here to comment on or editorialize about his character. I'm just going to give you the facts of the matter. And the facts, as I know them, if I'm reporting them correctly, is that he abused his pregnant girlfriend, and that he was charged for that. I don't remember exactly whether or not what the sentence was or whether the outcome was, but I know that what the fact is that he has been public about what he did. He has basically said, "I understand if you don't, if you will never look at me in a positive light ever in my life, basically for what I did, and I can understand that and live with that. All I can do is try and move forward and be the best person that I can be." And that's basically where he's at with that. As far as a player at Oklahoma State, he came in as a running back. And he was a very shifty, good, low to the ground type of scat back. And there were a lot of people I knew who I respected in our draft community who felt like he'd be better as a running back. They thought that he was actually that good in that regard. But what I saw at Oklahoma State, I mean, I agree. I could see why they thought that. But what I saw at Oklahoma State was someone who was very good at tracking the football. He tracked the ball well vertically. He understood how to go up for the ball and win it. He didn't seem to lose the ball on routes that went over his head. And you saw his just impressive ability in the open field as a runner and a kick returner. So I think the biggest difference that I've seen thus far is that he's absorbed the intricacies of the offense in Kansas City week by week and gotten better, been given more responsibilities, and he has executed them well. He hasn't made a lot of mistakes. He's running pretty sharp routes for what they're asking him to do. And then on occasion where the ball isn't completely accurate, he's making difficult catches. There was one that he made this week where I didn't get a chance to show because I couldn't get a good angle on it due to the television angle, but he had to actually he actually had to lean against the momentum of his break to catch a ball that was thrown well behind him while getting hit. And that's a really good sign that he's someone that's playing within his athletic comfort zone, and shows some toughness there. And because he's been successful deep so far in his career, and he's shown off that speed as a runner, teams that don't have great cover corners like Carolina last week, they played him off so much that he had easy hitch routes that he could, run a 4-yard hitch, catch the ball, and gain 10 yards, or make the first man miss. And when you have that combo of being able to run those routes and go deep, right now I look at him as a Jacoby Ford type of player who, when Ford was
he looked like he was going to be good early in his career. He looked like he was going to really translate with Oakland. I mean, he got a little bit banged up and was just never the same.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So to me, the conservative outlook is that he could develop into what Jacoby Ford was looking like when he was at his best in Oakland. And if he completely just works his tail off, continues to absorb the game at a level that that no one can really predict, you just have to wait and see. I could see how he has the athletic skills that you might put him within the range of the Easter Bunny. So I don't think he's ever going to be that good. But let's just say that we might look at him and go, he's better than Jacoby Ford, and we haven't seen the only player we can mention that we've seen like him at that dimension is Steve Smith, but no one wants to really say that, and I don't want to say that yet, but he is intriguing, and I've picked him up in leagues. I've paid a pretty penny in a couple of leagues to pick him up.
So and it's a wonderful comparison, just with the tenacity, like the competitiveness of this game with Steve Smith. And just as a quick aside, don't you see? So tell me if I'm crazy, because sometimes I let my mind run away with things. I do think that Dallas's pass defense is vulnerable. I think that Baltimore's a competitive team, and I think that Baltimore will rise to the occasion in Dallas and play them tough. Doesn't this just feel like a Steve Smith, 11 catches for 140 yards kind of weekend? That Steve Smith's going to just rise, like Ezekiel will score a touchdown, then Steve Smith will catch 3 or 4 balls on the next drive and take him down the field. I've got a feeling. It could just be that I'm 41 and I'm getting old.
Well, I mean, we're probably in the same boat then, or in the same old age home right now, having the same rant about this. But I do have a feeling that Steve Smith is looking at this and finding a way, just like Tom Brady finds a way to get something under his skin and get angry. I have a feeling that Steve Smith is probably looking at Ezekiel Elliott and go, just let him try and act like everything. He's running the show this week. I'm going to show him a thing or two. And it is because the Cowboys don't have that great of a defense, and they can be aggressive and throw it downfield, and they're mistake prone in some of those regards. And Steve Smith is just savvy enough, and he's also savvy enough to get under people's skin and to be able to, basically get a team fired up. I also wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Steve Smith wouldn't help a rookie like, Kenneth Dixon get a little fired up by the fact that he's playing Ezekiel Elliott and say, you're pretty good, you're healthy, you need to, and get in his face, because he's got a very get in your face kind of style even with his teammates. So I'll go with that narrative. It sounds fun.
DFS, there's your DFS special there. And if for a GPP for a tournament, like Flacco Smith stack.
And I'm starting him in redrafts anyway, but I mean,
oh yeah, definitely.
That's only because I'm afraid he'd kick my ass if I didn't, if he knew me.
Yeah, so. It's so funny because we were starting to simulate Steve Smith in our heads when you were talking about that, and immediately I was gonna have to do a sorry Joe. If I'm gonna try to be Steve Smith and get inside his head, then hit the little 5-second delay bleep button here.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite part of the top 10, and I think it's the best application of just very simple, again, observation-based data about football not numerical data. But then speaking of DFS, because this is like a week-to-week thing, so let's go through some of the fresh fish. Anything that references Shawshank Redemption is good. And I want to look ahead on some of these fresh fish. Okay, let's start with the Atlanta linebackers. Atlanta is on bye this week. And obviously David Johnson next week. Oh, duh. What about Spencer Ware? Because you're really familiar with Spencer Ware's game. In Week 13, Kansas City, and you're going to be at the game, actually.
Yeah.
So,
I picked this game for this reason. I was joking around with my readers in this week's gut check that I was like, I was thinking about the Panthers game to take my father-in-law to, or maybe the Packers game, and I had to decide in July, and I just didn't know the Falcons would be that good, and I didn't think the Packers or the Panthers would be this bad. So I thought it was going to be kind of an opposite scenario, and for a little bit I was a little bit worried. But then I looked at the Chiefs, and my whole explanation was, they've got a good makings of an aggressive, fun defense that could offset this Falcons offense if it takes the next step, and this could be a really competitive game where two teams are decent but not quite really good. And now I'm kind of at the point that it's actually turned out to be a nice matchup and even better than what I expected. But, I offered all that, and then I joked, and I said, but you guys all know me. You know why I picked this matchup. It was because I like Spencer Ware, and I want to see Spencer Ware and Travis Kelce play. And that's pretty much the truth. When you look at the Atlanta linebackers, they are not very good when you run right at them. For whatever reason, they don't take great angles. They are either hesitant or too aggressive with their pursuit. They get eaten up and run over. They're not the greatest tacklers, but if you go side to side, you go, east west, they're a little bit better in that regard. And I think with Spencer Ware, and this Chiefs front, they're going to be able to run through them, and you're going to see some excellent play there. And on top of that, if that doesn't work, he's such a good pass receiver, and he's at least for halfway through the season, he was one of the leaders in yards after catch at the running back position. That's also where Atlanta really falters, is in the receiving game against backs and tight ends.
So I have to ask, just because. Well, first, let me ask this question. Jared Goff, you're looking at Miami's defense as a play this week, and just what do you expect? Is Jared Goff going to look more like Bryce Petty? Are they going to handle him that way, or is there a chance that he's going to be overwhelmed? Or Cody Kessler? I mean, so we have Cody Kessler and Bryce Petty as a line that it's not a total implosion. Could Jared Goff be below that line, or are we looking at LA trying to win another game 9-6, which they might be able to with those injuries on the Miami offensive line?
I have no idea, man. And it's frustrating because, to me, I wonder how much of this is Jared Goff being pushed into action because,
ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, exactly. Because of the public pressure and the Rams reacting to that. If that's the case, then don't expect anything good from Jared Goff. That's basically the case. And if he thrives under it, then look at it as a pleasant surprise. He wouldn't be someone I'd want to start. I probably wouldn't want to start the players who are surrounding, the surrounding talent that he's going to, for that very reason. And it's not a talent thing. It's the fact that, as I've mentioned numerous times in numerous outlets, that he's learning the equivalent of Chinese as a quarterback right now. And people don't seem to want to understand that. They just think that, well, Dak Prescott, look what he did. Look what Cody Kessler did. Look what Carson Wentz has done. And they just want to take those opportunities. Cody Kessler played in a West Coast offense. Carson Wentz played in a West Coast offense. Dak Prescott played in an offense where he didn't do air raid concepts that were simple throw to grass, so he was at least a little bit further ahead, and he plays behind the best offensive line in probably the past 5 to 10 years with a great running game. You're not getting any of that with Jared Goff. Jared Goff's playing behind an offensive line that's making Todd Gurley look bad.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was
I'm never going to sing Hurly Gurly. I'm never going to sing Hurly Gurly Man again. I'm just never going to get to sing it again.
I hope you can, but yeah.
So that's LA has a matchup with Atlanta coming up in week 14, but let's go through some more fresh fish here. You mentioned Leotis McKelvin, and again DFS special. You mentioned that Taylor Gabriel frustrated him. How does Tyler Lockett? If they can get Tyler Lockett this weekend,
Yeah.
well then,
Ty-
what's
Lockett or Baldwin, both of those guys are going to be able to tell stories on Leotis McKelvin. I mean, McKelvin has his moments where he can be very good, and he had a game-winning interception against Julio Jones, but it wasn't a great throw on that play. So he's capable of rising to the occasion. But both those corners, and Nolan Carroll was out halfway through the game last week. So these Eagles corners are susceptible to good route runners, and we know that Baldwin's a good route runner. We know that Tyler Lockett has some good double moves in his vocabulary, and he's a very quick receiver who can bend at the hips well. And the same could be said about a guy like Paul Richardson, but again, that's for a G, unless you're just like really going out on a limb there, you're not going to look at him. But I think that Lockett is a decent play. I think that's a great suggestion, Bloom. And then, of course, Baldwin's the very obvious play that probably everyone's doing.
chalk? Let's look at Washington's corners against Green Bay. So let's say let me see if there's been anything on Josh Norman and Jordy Nelson. But let's say based on what we have observed, what you have observed about Josh Norman, if they do use him to shadow Jordy Nelson, what would you say is the outlook here?
I think that Nelson still has probably somewhere between a 60 to 80-yard game and maybe somewhere between 3 to 5 catches. The thing is how healthy is Jordy Nelson's knee? I mean, I haven't really seen him play the level that he's capable of playing pre-injury, and where I think Norman gets a little bit. Where Norman's pretty good is where he can stay with you if you're being physical, but you're not quite as quick or quicker than he is. But if you're quicker than he is and you have that physical element and speed, he gets beat plenty. And I think that A.J. Green is a good example. So is Terrell Pryor is another good example who was really able to beat him. And Norman Norman has never been that player. And I mean, we've seen that coming from really months away, that he was a off-cover corner. He was a off coverage type of guy. And so I wouldn't stay away from Jordy Nelson because of Josh Norman. But at the same time, if you have a guy who's maybe you're competing with him as another number 3 receiver who has an even better matchup, then I might consider it.
So then do we look to, based on whether it's Norman on Nelson, or you mentioned Kendall Fuller, who Stephon Diggs was able to have a really good week against. Do we look more to, is Devontae Adams, because we talked about Randall Cobb, and Randall Cobb maybe not looking like himself. Is this based on DFS prices, or, Adams has a better chance of outperforming expectations than Nelson does? Is that what we're looking at this week in this game?
Yeah, and I like Devontae Adams this week for that very reason. I know that I've been seeing some stuff that seem to point to the numbers say that Devontae Adams isn't a great play down the stretch, as a whole, and people expect to see him regress and that kind of thing. But I don't think it matches the film, and I think the film says a little bit more that he's running better routes. He's catching the ball more consistently. Aaron Rodgers trusts him. He's the healthiest of the group. He can stretch the field and also make plays after the catch. So while he's not a superstar as a receiver, he's turned into a solid receiver with good pro athletic skills that can beat you when called upon. And I would easily take him and not have any lack of confidence about starting him this week.
Last one in the fresh fish column, one Ryan Shazier, and this is go ahead, get your Turkey Jones picture out, because it is close to Thanksgiving. But Cleveland Pittsburgh this weekend.
Yeah,
Hugh Jackson's been talking about more Isaiah Crowell. Is Isaiah Crowell the kind of running back and the Cleveland running game, the kind of running game that can take advantage of Ryan Shazier's freelancing, let's call it?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt, because Isaiah Crowell is a very good one-cut runner who can cut back across a crease. And a lot of the yards that he gets even right now are based on him being creative behind the line of scrimmage to avoid penetration and get downfield. So it plays right into Ryan Shazier's hands, because Shazier's been kind of a boom-bust player he's kind of the CJ Spiller of linebackers right now in terms of his bad habits, which is I'm going to go for all or I'm going to give up everything. And that's kind of what happened to him. That's what's happened to him frequently in the run game. And when Mike Tomlin even pointed out that his defense had to do a better job of maintaining gap responsibility, I don't think he felt comfortable wanting to point out specifically Ryan Shazier. But that is one of the guys he was talking about, because week after week after week, you see him really trying to hit a gap and then leaving one open, and the running back runs right through it behind him or to the other side.
We've got fourth quarter here. New Orleans offense really stalling out. We just saw a nice downfield completion from Cam Newton to Greg Olsen. That's sort of trying to put this game out of reach here. Is New Orleans offense has been very lackluster, and both teams. I mean, if this result holds up, they'll move to 4-6. It'll be good for Atlanta. And again, that Atlanta KC game you're going to see pivotal. We got just a few more minutes before we wind up the hour here, Matt. I guess you did a good piece. I loved your gut check when you made sure everyone knows that I dropped Jai week 3 or week 4. And you picked him up. No. I need to be reminded. Not that I don't think about it.
I have, folks. I just have to do a little public service on this. I do this because of the people I play in leagues with on a regular basis. Bloom routinely is one of the top owners in just about every league that I'm in. He is. So it's a nice opportunity that when you get that rare opportunity that you control Bloom on something, on a decision he makes that doesn't work out, you've got to treasure it for a minute or two, so that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, and I hold over Cecil. We're going back to like what was Jamal Charles breakout year, 2010?
Yeah.
Like he dropped Jamal Charles 2 weeks into the season, and I picked up Jamal Charles and rode him to a championship. So no, please. I mean, I've incurred all kinds of karma for that. But no, I like the way you just broke down. It made me want to do something similar. Like this is what I've done. This is my initial plan going in. This is how it went. This is what I did then in response to how things went. But what I want to know is a larger question here is week 11. This trade deadline in a lot of dynasty leagues, a lot of leagues in general. Have you been trying to pull any trades, or what kinds of trades, players you might be targeting, or if on the flip side, maybe some teams you decided, well, it's not going to be there for me this year. Some, just any sort of trade market moves, just your searchlight out there as we're getting up against the trade deadline here in a lot of leagues.
I've had some offers, but I haven't really offered anybody myself. And I'd definitely be interested to hear some of the ones that you're getting, and we can talk about that too. But the only one that I can remember, some of the ones that I did trade Kristen Michael a couple weeks ago for Michael Crabtree in a dynasty league, and I also got a pick, I believe, for it, or I gave up a lower pick and got a little bit of a little bit more with it. So that was a fortunate play. I was someone in one of our leagues wanted Zach Miller from me, and he wanted to offer me a 3rd round pick for him. And it was a premium PPR league, and with Miller having some good opportunities down the stretch. But this guy was really looking for someone to be a bye week filler or injury week filler for Gronkowski. And I would have settled for a 2nd round pick, but he didn't have one. And he's a great team. And I thought, well, I'll ask for the low end one that I'm probably going to end up getting with it. And he was like, no way. But he understood where I was coming from, because I was like, Brandon Coleman with a fallout route here for a touchdown in the back of the end zone, which was a pretty nice throw for Breeze. So this would be fun if they could do a little reverse hex on Carolina.
A lot of time. I'm blooming. I made a bloom them here as they went right down the field. 2 nice runs by Tim Hightower, 11 and 27-yarder. Anyway.
Yeah. So it's good stuff there. But I mean, for me, that's those have been the extent of mine. Nothing really that exciting. How about you? I mean,
and I haven't really been able to get much done this week, but I did write a column, a buy low, sell high, or instead of buy low, sell high, I classify players as win now and wait till next year. And nice. One of the things that did surprise me is in dynasty leagues, there are running backs you can get probably relatively cheap that can help you win now, particularly LaShawn McCoy and DeMarco Murray, who will both be 29. Both are performing at a very high level. They're in great situations. Even Frank Gore as a 33-year-old is a solid running back too. I think that Steve Smith is an excellent player to target right now because I think people are forgetting that he had back-to-back 8-catch games before he got hurt, and he's looking like that player again. And I would expect that he's going to be Joe Flacco is not silly. Like, he knows what's going to make it work. I think Martellus Bennett is a player to target right now, not just because of the Gronk injury. I think that he is a free agent next year, so he may not be back with New England. However, he's a player that, because of where he's at in his career, in general, I think in dynasty leagues, people become a little bit slavish to age, right? So like Greg Olson is 31 years old. I mean, maybe it's a little bit late since he played tonight, but if you're rebuilding, I mean, what's Greg Olson's window, Matt? Like, still 2 to 3 more years at this level. He's not showing signs of slowing down right now.
No, yeah, exactly. At least maybe 3 to 4. I mean, look at Gonzalez.
Sure. So somebody rebuilding might look at him as, well, I'm rebuilding, so I might as well sell him off for whatever I can get for him. So I think that that's something you can take advantage of right now in dynasty leagues, teams that are in rebuilding mode. Even Jordy Nelson, I think, is going to be 31, and he is slowing down a little bit. Larry Fitzgerald, just a absolutely, like, so as a quick aside on Larry Fitzgerald, by the way, this might be something odd to point out, but I think it's something indicative of the larger trend that we talk about a lot. Larry Fitzgerald is now on track to set a career high for receptions in a season for the second straight year. Now, I love Larry Fitzgerald. He's going back to Minnesota this weekend, by the way. That's fun. But it's not because he's getting better. I mean, it's not because and some of it's because of how he's being used, but I also think we are seeing, and this is for the PPR purists out there, the anti-PPR purists, that the value of a reception is not the same as it used to be in the NFL. And if anything, PPR was a reaction to running backs being overvalued in leagues, and now we need to go back to something, either scale it or have PPR, because to me that's an exhibit. Like, if we were doing some sort of court case of why PPR has gone a little bit too far, if Larry Fitzgerald is setting career highs, and it wasn't like Larry Fitzgerald was, he was a Hall of Fame level receiver for most of his career. So if he's setting career highs at this point in his career in receptions, then a reception isn't worth what it used to be.
No, and I absolutely agree with that. And I think that makes perfect sense because it really is just an extension of the ground game at this point when you look at the way that passes are thrown. I mean, you look at some of the routes, bubble routes, shallow routes, stick routes. These are all very quick plays that take place below the 10-yard deck of a passing game. So these are really kind of like, oh, I'm getting blitzed. Here, let me just throw it here. I don't want to run. I want to run the ball and get rushing yardage, but I don't want to just run it up the middle because they're stacking the line. Oh, I'll just throw it out here. And it's just a simple reaction to all that. So I agree. I'll even add some guys that I think are worth kind of picking up down the stretch in IDP leagues, is just guys to keep an eye on. I've been shopping for recently. Preston Smith, I know that he's been kind of up and down this year, but he's a good guy at outside linebacker that's interesting. And Anthony Chiquillo. I've been trying to get him, and I'll just say I actually run out of money in one of our leagues, Bloom, in our Game Breakers League. I tried to get him running out of money because I picked up Smith first, and I was like, I can't get Chiquillo. But I've had him in a couple of leagues and have actually been very happy with what I've seen with the results with what he's doing down the stretch. And I think that eventually we'll see him and Dupree maybe on the outside.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's making up for the Jarvis Jones miss. We'll see about Dupree. And I don't. Chiquillo is either nearly a force player or a force player in Justice Mosqueda terms. And right now, Carolina is cooperating with a couple of the completions.
Maybe there's more burning than pine in all these Georgia forests that are kind of the wind are blowing up.
Oh yeah,
here.
Yeah.
Because we got one about an hour away. We got a lot of smoke up here, but I mean, I can't say that it's making me any more erratic than usual.
No, well, yeah, exactly. It's the baseline here. So on this players to look at if you're going to wait till next year, I'll just give you a quick quiz here, Matt. And I think we mentioned him already. How old is Isaiah Crowell?
Oh, I think he's probably got to be 23.
He's 20. He's only 23.
Yeah.
He's only 23. A lot of players in the draft are coming in at 23.
Yeah.
He's in his third year at 23. He still has not hit his physical peak yet. And look, Cleveland's quarterback situation is not going to get any better, but he's a free agent in a year.
And he's maturing. You can see that he's maturing both on the field and off the field. Yeah. So
you had said earlier in his career, and this is to show you how fair Matt Waldman is, even about his pet players. You had said, if if we see signs of dedication, he did outlast Terrence West. That was more about Terrence West. If we see signs of dedication, if we see it translating to his play, then that's a sign that he could be a special player. And then you followed up by saying we're not seeing that.
Right.
You weren't seeing the effort from play to play or the focus from play to play. And I think we are, or at least earlier this year, we were seeing that. You're absolutely right. So Isaiah Crowell, if Isaiah Crowell was in a good situation this year, he would be one of the stories of fantasy football a la Melvin Gordon.
Yeah.
I think.
I think you're absolutely right with that. I mean, imagine if he were in Miami while Miami was taking over. I don't think there'd be. I think Jay Ajayi is a more, how would I put it? He's a more talented runner when it comes to the physical. Like, he's got more agility, he's got more burst, he's got probably better long speed, and he's got a little bit better balance. But I think Isaiah Crowell is a more refined runner than Jay Ajayi, and if you put him in the same situation, we'd be seeing that kind of production out of him.
Folks, we will be back with you Sunday morning, Matt and Gene and I, as we go into Week 11. It's always fun. We'll see what happens with this game. Certainly, New Orleans trying to make it interesting here at the end. We appreciate all of you taking this journey with us every year. Footballguys.com. Again, if you're in the water of NBA DFS, check out hoopsguys.com, free through Thanksgiving. And it's always a blast to enjoy the football season. You can feel it, folks. The Dallas-Pittsburgh game, I think, marked it for a lot of people, that this is when the games get more intense. There's a lot more on the line. Teams are digging down deeper. And then it translates to the same with our fantasy teams, in the way that we pour over every decision. And we're lucky to have the help of people like Gene and Matt and the whole Football Guy staff. And I'm lucky to get a chance to be part of the products that we bring you here every week. On assignment for Cecil Lamby. Cecil will be back soon. Aww. Yeah. See, that's what I'm talking about. Underneath it all, in fantasy football, that should be the feeling, and the feeling that we get getting to hang out with each other. So be like that hamster. Enjoy your carrot while you can.
Someday.
Yeah, enjoy that turkey. Right?
That's going to be me after the Steelers kick the Browns. I'll just be, you want to get under a blanket eating a carrot.
I'd be happy. I want to be there. That's where I want to be. And I want to be here with y'all 8 days a week on the Audible, footballguys.com. Thank you, everybody. Always stay classy.